Hello there. I want to kind of review my main camera because I think that it is like a really fantastic camera. And if you're just starting out and you want to have a camera that's pretty good, closer to pro quality, this is, in the way that it feels and the way that it works, this is a really good option. This is the Canon 40D. It's got a magnesium body. It's supposedly not weatherproof, but weather sealed. I've not tested it out. I do not shoot. You see a lot of guys, especially landscape photographers and stuff, they go out in the rain and the snow, and I do not shoot in the rain. And I don't care whether, you know, the camera was guaranteed to be waterproof and all. I'm not putting a camera in the rain. I don't want mold in my lenses. There's a host of problems with all of that moisture that, you know, if I were doing it for a living and could consider that, you know, it's a cost of doing business, that's one thing. But what I'm talking about is not so much a professional photographer, but someone like me who is an amateur. And let's face it, most people are going to be amateurs. They do it for the fun of it, not trying to make any money. Okay, so that's the direction that I'm coming from. So this is the Canon 40D. This was a prosumer camera. It was debuted in 2007. So this design is 13 years old. This is 2020 as I speak. It's 10.1 megapixels, or effectively 10 megapixels. 10 megapixels is fairly low. But I kind of want to address that in a couple of ways. First of all, when you look at these cameras and you look at the history of the digital camera, you'll see that when the digital camera came out, there were professionals that were printing billboards or selling pictures that they printed billboards out of with 6 megapixel cameras, okay? People have this idea that, well, you can't blow this up unless it's a certain megapixel to this particular size or whatnot. And everybody is kind of they really make that an important part. Well, I need this many megapixels, you know, in case I want to blow up a big picture. Well, nobody does that. The only people that blow up big pictures are professional landscape photographers who are selling prints, or any other kind of professional photographer that's selling prints of their work, like a wedding photographer. And even wedding photographers, they're not blowing up prints, you know, to cover your wall with. Okay, most people are sharing pictures on Instagram and Facebook and YouTube and places like that. They're not blowing up huge. Even like with wedding photography, I would venture to guess that there's more digital wedding albums that are sold now than anything that, you know, than a paper photograph, an album with actual, you know, 5x7 or 8x10 or whatever you want to call it, whatever size you want, photo albums. They're probably 3/4 of it is digital. Okay, so the idea that if your camera won't print, you know, besides, it doesn't matter. Okay, I could take a 20 megapixel camera, and if I blow that sucker up big enough, there's a limit to how wide I can make it and how tall I can make it before people are going to see problems with the resolution or whatever, okay? Unless you're backed off of it and viewing it at the distance you're supposed to be viewing it at, instead of going, let me look at every detail and find every flaw in the photo. So, in my opinion, I'm not too worried about blowing things up, but I have a video on this channel of photographs taken with this camera that I enlarged, and they look pretty darn good. I think it was only a 10 by 12, but they look pretty darn good. You know, I can't see anything wrong with them. So, and I'm not going to be blowing anything up much bigger than that. So, when you're talking about hobby, amateur stuff, look, you want a camera that feels good in your hands. You want one where all the buttons are located in a place where you can work them. I can operate pretty much anything on this camera pretty much with my eyes closed. Okay, I wouldn't want to do that because your eye is really, really important in photography. But I'm just saying I could do it in the dark. Okay, because I know this camera. And you want a camera whose layout is simple to use. That's why I chose this. I could have got like a 15 megapixel Rebel type camera, but the layout is not the same. A lot of what you have to do, you have to go into the menus to do. With this, I can do it by buttons. And if I understand the camera and know how to work it, then I can do it. It's very simple and very easy to get what I want, because I shoot in manual mode 99.9% of the time. I don't think I've ever done anything but like try out aperture priority mode or shutter priority mode and didn't like them. I much prefer on the fly manual. Now, I'm a landscape, well, not really landscape, I'm a wildlife and nature photographer, and I do a bit of landscape. I consider that part of nature, okay? But I'm not, you know, I'm not a strictly landscape photographer. I much prefer wildlife and nature. And so, a camera like this, one of the things that I like about Canon is the color profile, okay? The colors in this camera, from this camera, are absolutely fantastic. The only color in a camera, and I know I'm not using technical terms, but this is not going to be a technical review. This is a hands-on review from an amateur about this type of camera. The only cameras that produce a color that I like on the same level as Canon, and depending on what I'm shooting, I might even prefer it to what the Canon does, although all of that's tweakable in software, is Fuji. Fuji's colors are fantastic. Matter of fact, with my film cameras, 3/4 of the time I'm shooting Fuji film because I just like the colors they give. And that translates to their cameras. Their cameras have got fantastic color. But I love the color profile of this camera. The white balance, the automatic white balance is really good. I very seldom ever have to correct it. It's a magnesium body, so it's got a little bit of weight. It doesn't feel plasticky, but also it helps to steady the hand a bit more when I'm taking pictures. And I have it coupled with a 75 to 300 millimeter Canon kit lens. What I would say about that is, as a wildlife photographer, particularly when you're talking birds, things like that, but anything at all, you know, if you can get off of the subject a bit, you don't spook them as much or at all, and you can get better, more natural shots. And this camera is what's known as a crop sensor camera, which means that there's a difference, a couple of different main camera types. One is a full frame, which means when you take a shot, everything in that lens's view will be reproduced. With a crop sensor, what you're doing is it's taking a picture of more of the center, what's in the center of the lens, and that's outside of it does not get taken. And what that actually does is it makes the lens work kind of like a longer lens. For instance, and the crop factor, depending on what camera you're using, what brand, is different. Most of them are 1.5, and the micro 4/3 I think is 2 times. So if you had a 50 millimeter lens on a micro 4/3, you multiply that by 2, and you'd have like a 100mm equivalent. So it makes the lens seem longer. So for me, I like the crop sensor because this is a 300mm lens, but it acts like a 480mm lens, so close to 500. If you know anything about cameras and lenses, the more telephoto, the longer the lens, the more money it costs. And there's no way I could afford like a 400 or a 600mm lens. Even the cheap ones are too expensive. Okay, but you can find the little 75 to 300 floating around all over the place for next to nothing compared to what it will do. And so that's why I like crop sensors, because it effectively gives me almost the equivalent of a 500mm lens. This has, I don't know if I can, it has manual, aperture priority, shutter priority, and a program mode, which is almost like automatic. It also has scene modes, so that they're automatic modes for different situations. And it has some custom functions and kind of like bulb. But I never go off a manual. But you can do as little or as much with this camera as you want to. But it's a fantastic camera for someone just starting out that wants to move up to a camera that works and feels more like a professional type camera. And I would not trade this for anything less than like a 60D or an 80D or something along the same lines as this, but you know, with more improved kind of electronics and software and stuff that's in it. This takes a slamming picture. I'll put some pictures up at the end of this. And if you are looking for a camera to learn on, particularly if you want to learn to shoot in manual mode, it's a really hard camera to beat. And so that's my review.